The group text arrived at 9:23 a.m. on a Friday morning. Family dinner tonight at the Grandmont Hotel. 7 p.m. Nicholas booked us the presidential suite. Dress appropriately. Mom. I stared at the message, coffee halfway to my lips. The Grandmont Hotel. My hotel. The one I'd purchased 11 months ago for $12.3 million after the previous owners had run it into near bankruptcy. The one I'd spent the last year renovating, rebranding, and rebuilding into one of the city's premier boutique properties. The one my family had no idea I owned. I set down my coffee and pulled up the hotel's reservation system on my laptop. There it was. Nicholas Harper Presidential Suite, checked in yesterday for a 3-night stay. Rate, $2,800 per night. My older brother Nicholas, staying in my hotel's most expensive accommodation. This was going to be interesting. At 32, I'd grown accustomed to my family's assumptions about my life. To them, I was Aria, the youngest, the one who'd wasted her business degree on hospitality management. While Nicholas had become a surgeon and my sister Cassandra ran a successful law practice, I'd chosen hotels. Working in hotels, as my father always said with barely concealed disappointment, is just service work with a fancy title. What they didn't know was that I wasn't working in hotels. I owned them. 4 properties across 3 states, with a combined value of approximately $43 million. My hospitality management company had expanded into hotel acquisitions 3 years ago, and I'd built a portfolio that generated over $8 million in annual revenue. But I drove a modest Subaru, wore practical clothes, and lived simply. I'd learned early that my family measured worth by display, not substance. So I'd stopped displaying anything. Let them assume. I called the Grandmont's general manager, David Richardson. He'd been with the hotel for 15 years and had stayed on after my acquisition. He was professional, experienced, and utterly loyal. David, it's Aria. Miss Harper, good morning. What can I do for you? I see there's a reservation for Nicholas Harper in the presidential suite. Yes, 3 nights. Checked in yesterday. Is there a problem? He's my brother. There's a family dinner in the suite tonight at 7. Pause. Your brother doesn't know you own the hotel. No one in my family knows. I see. David's tone shifted, understanding immediately. How would you like us to handle this? Normally for now. I'll be attending the dinner. Let's see how the evening unfolds. Understood. I'll brief the staff to be prepared for anything. Thank you, David. After hanging up, I reviewed the Grandmont's recent performance metrics. Occupancy was up 34% since the acquisition. Guest satisfaction scores had climbed from 3.2 to 4.7 stars. The restaurant was now booking 2 weeks out. We'd turned the property around completely. And tonight my family would sit in the presidential suite, eating dinner in a hotel they assumed I merely worked at, with no idea they were in a property I owned. I arrived at the Grandmont at 6:45 p.m., parking in my reserved owner's spot in the underground garage. The spot Nicholas had probably assumed was for some faceless corporate entity. The hotel gleamed. We'd restored the 1920s Art Deco facade, updated all the rooms and completely renovated the lobby. The crystal chandeliers I'd personally selected cast warm light across marble floors. David met me in the private hallway near my office. Your family arrived about 20 minutes ago. Your brother made several requests. What kind of requests? Additional champagne, earlier room service, and he asked if we could move the thermostat controls to the suite since he found the temperature unacceptable. I explained our environmental systems are centrally controlled. How did he react? He mentioned that his sister works here, and implied you could override the system for him. I smiled slightly. I see. Also, David continued, he's been somewhat demanding with the staff. Nothing terrible but dismissive. The kind of guest who treats service workers as invisible. Noted. I'll head up now. Good luck, Ms. Harper. The presidential suite was on the top floor, accessible by a dedicated elevator. I rode up alone, watching the floors tick by, preparing myself. The suite doors were open when I arrived. I could hear voices inside, Mom's laugh, Dad's booming pronouncements, Cassandra's sharp wit. Nicholas was holding court about something medical, probably a surgery he'd performed. I walked in. Aria. Mom looked up from the sofa, her expression immediately shifting to assessment. Her eyes traveled over my simple black dress and flats. "Oh, is that what you're wearing?" "Hello, Mom." Nicholas turned from the bar where he was pouring drinks. "Hey, little sister. Can you do me a favor? The temperature in here is off. Can you talk to whoever controls that and get it adjusted? It's stuffy." "The temperature is fine," I said. "Few maybe. But some of us have higher standards." He grinned, taking the edge off the insult. "Barely. Perks of having a sister who works here, right? You can pull some strings." "I don't pull strings." Cassandra emerged from the bedroom. "Arya. God, it's been months. Still working at this hotel?" "Something like that." Dad stood by the windows looking out at the city view. "Quite a place Nicholas booked for us. Top floor, presidential suite. This is what success looks like, Arya. This is what happens when you apply yourself to a real career." "David," I said quietly. "I'm not David, I'm your father." I was calling for David Richardson, the general manager. "He's supposed to bring the wine list." "Oh." Dad turned back to the window. "Well, we already ordered champagne. $400 bottle. Nicholas is treating us." Nicholas raised his glass. "Only the best for my family. Though Arya, you might want to stick with the house wine. This is probably outside your budget." I sat down on one of the suite's leather chairs. The chairs I'd selected from a boutique furniture maker in Italy. Each one cost $3,200. "I'm fine, thanks." Mom settled next to me, patting my hand. "So tell us, sweetie, are you still doing the front desk work? Or have you moved up to management yet?" "I'm in management." "That's wonderful. What's your title?" "It varies by property." Cassandra laughed. "Varies by property? Arya, you work at one hotel. Unless you're job hopping again." "I work with several properties." "Several," Dad repeated. "Arya, when are you going to settle down? Pick one place and build a real career? You're 32 years old. Nicholas was chief resident by your age." "And I had already made partner," Cassandra added. "Dad's right. You need stability." A knock at the door interrupted. David entered, followed by two servers with the dinner set up. He caught my eye briefly and I gave him a slight nod. "Good evening," David said smoothly. "I'm David Richardson, the general manager. I wanted to personally ensure everything meets your expectations this evening." "About time," Nicholas said. "Look, we need the temperature adjusted. It's at least 3 degrees too warm in here." "I apologize, sir, but our climate control is optimized for guest comfort. I assure you the temperature is set to the standard." "I don't care about the standard. I'm paying $2,800 a night for this suite." "Adjust it." David's expression didn't change. "I'll see what I can do, sir." As the servers set up dinner on the suite's dining table, Mom turned to me. "Arya, since you work here, can you make sure they bring extra bread? And tell them to make sure the steaks are cooked properly. Nicholas is very particular." "I don't work in the kitchen, Mom. But you must have some influence. That's the benefit of working at a nice hotel like this, right? Employee perks." "Something like that." Dinner was served. The food was exceptional. Chef Raymond's new menu was performing beautifully. But my family was too busy talking about themselves to notice. Nicholas dominated the conversation with stories about his surgical cases. Cassandra interjected with tales of her latest courtroom victories. Mom and Dad beamed at them, asking questions, expressing admiration. No one asked me anything. Halfway through the meal, Dad set down his wine glass and looked at me with what he probably thought was fatherly concern. "Arya, your mother and I have been talking. We're worried about you." "Worried? You're 32, unmarried, working in hospitality. Have you thought about your future? About retirement? About building real wealth?" "I think about it." "Do you have any savings?" Mom asked. "Any investments?" "Some." Nicholas leaned back in his chair. "Look, Arya, I don't mean to be harsh, but hotel work isn't a career path. It's a job. There's a difference. You're never going to own real estate or build significant wealth working front desk at a hotel." "You'll never own property," Dad agreed. "Not in this market. Not on a hotel worker's salary. You should have listened to us and gone to medical school." "Or law school," Cassandra added. "It's not too late. You're still young enough to start over." I cut into my steak. "I don't want to start over." "That's the problem," Dad said. "You're complacent. You've settled for mediocrity." Look at this hotel, beautiful place, isn't it? Someone owns this. Someone's smart enough to invest in real estate to build something. That could have been you if you'd made better choices. Could have been, I repeated. Nicholas gestured around the suite. This is what ownership looks like, Arya. Real success. The person who owns this hotel is probably worth millions. That's the kind of life you could have had. Is it? Instead, you're serving people who have that life. Do you see the difference? There are owners and there are workers. You chose to be a worker. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. We're just trying to help, darling. We want you to be happy. But we also want you to be realistic about your limitations. Why limitations? Yes. Not everyone can be a doctor or a lawyer. Some people are meant for service roles. There's no shame in that. She smiled. It's who you are. I set down my fork and looked at each of them. Nicholas, smug in his borrowed luxury. Cassandra, pitying in her assessment. Mom and Dad, disappointed in their failure of a daughter. Can I ask you something? I said quietly. Of course, Dad said. Do any of you know what I actually do for work? They exchanged glances. You work at hotels, Mom said carefully. Doing what specifically? Silence. You never asked, I said. In 10 years, none of you have ever asked me to describe my actual job. You assumed and you stopped caring. That's not fair, Cassandra protested. We ask about your life all the time. No, you don't. You ask if I'm still working at hotels and then change the subject. You've never asked about my responsibilities, my achievements, my goals. You decided what my life was and stopped looking for anything different. Nicholas scoffed. Don't be dramatic. We know you manage hotels or something. Or something, I agreed. Another knock at the door. David entered again, this time with a formal expression. I apologize for the interruption. Mr. Harper, may I speak with you privately? Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of my family, Nicholas replied. Very well. Sir, I've been informed by the owner that your behavior towards staff members has been inappropriate. Several employees have reported dismissive and demeaning treatment. Nicholas's face flushed. Excuse me? I've been perfectly polite. You referred to one of our housekeepers as the cleaning person and told her to hurry up when she was servicing your room. You snapped your fingers at a waiter in the restaurant. And you've made multiple demands that contradict hotel policies. That's absurd. I'm a guest here. A paying guest. I demand to speak to the owner. The owner is aware of the situation. Then get them on the phone. David looked at me. Ms. Harper. Every head in the room swiveled toward me. Yes, David. Would you like to address Mr. Nicholas Harper's complaints directly? I would, thank you. I stood up, smoothing my dress. The dress I'd worn specifically because it was simple and unassuming, the kind of thing that let people underestimate me. Nicholas, I said calmly, your behavior toward my staff has been unacceptable. Snapping fingers, dismissive language, and treating service workers as invisible violates our guest conduct policy. Your staff. Mom said. Arya, what? I purchased the Grandmont Hotel 11 months ago, I continued. The acquisition price was $12.3 million, paid in cash. I own this property. I own this building. I own this presidential suite you're sitting in. Complete silence. That's impossible, Dad said finally. It's not. David, can you pull up the ownership records? David produced a tablet, tapped a few times, then turned it toward my family. Grandmont Hotel, purchased November 2023 by Harper Hospitality Group. Registered owner, Arya Michelle Harper. Nicholas grabbed the tablet, staring at the screen. This can't be right. It's right. Harper Hospitality Group is my company. I own 4 hotels. The Grandmont here in the city, the Riverside Resort upstate, the Maritime Inn on the coast, and the Summit Lodge in Colorado. Combined value, approximately $43 million. $43 million, Cassandra whispered. My company generates roughly $8 million in annual revenue. I have 83 employees across the 4 properties. I've been in the hotel acquisition business for 3 years. Mom's hand had gone to her throat. But you said you work with hotels. I do work with hotels. I acquire them, renovate them, and operate them. That's my work. Why didn't you tell us? Dad's voice had gone quiet. You never asked. You assumed I was working front desk and never looked deeper. Every time I tried to talk about what I was doing, you changed the subject or made jokes about playing hotel manager. We thought, Mom started. You thought I was a failure. You've said it 100 different ways. Tonight you told me I'd never own property while sitting in a hotel I own. You said I'd chosen mediocrity, while eating in a suite that costs more per night than most people's monthly rent. A suite I provide. Nicholas set down the tablet, his face pale. Arya, I didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. That's not fair, Cassandra said. You deliberately kept this from us. No. I lived my life. You weren't interested in it, so you didn't see it. There's a difference. David cleared his throat. Ms. Harper, regarding Mr. Nicholas Harper's room status? I looked at my brother. At his expensive suit, his confident posture that was crumbling, his face that had gone from smug to shocked. The reservation remains valid, I said. But any further complaints from staff about his conduct and he'll be asked to leave. Understood. After David left, my family sat frozen. Dinner was getting cold. No one touched their food. I don't understand, Mom said finally. Where did you get $12 million? I started with the Maritime Inn. Bought it for $1.8 million with a combination of savings and loans. Spent 2 years turning it profitable, then used the equity to acquire the Riverside Resort. Built from there. Your savings, Dad repeated. From hotel work? From hotel management. I was running operations for the Blackstone Group's hospitality division. Made $285,000 a year, saved aggressively, invested wisely. When I saw the opportunity to acquire distressed properties, I took it. $285,000? Nicholas's voice cracked slightly. That's more than I make as a surgeon. Different industries, different compensation structures. But you always said you worked in hotels, Mom protested. You made it sound so ordinary. I do work in hotels. That's not ordinary to me. You're the ones who decided it was beneath me. Cassandra leaned forward. Why are you telling us this now? Why reveal it like this? Because Nicholas booked the presidential suite in my hotel and spent the evening mocking my career while sitting in a room I provide. Because all of you sat here and told me I'd never own real estate while literally surrounded by my real estate. Because I'm tired of being treated like a disappointment when I've built something I'm proud of. We're your family, Dad said. We deserve to know these things. Do you? You spent 10 years not wanting to know. You were perfectly happy assuming I was a failure. Why do you suddenly deserve the truth now that the truth is financially impressive? No one had an answer for that. Arya, Mom tried, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used when she wanted something. Surely you can understand our confusion. You never acted like you were successful. You drive that old car, you wear normal clothes. I drive a reliable car and wear comfortable clothes because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Unlike some people who lease luxury vehicles, they can barely afford to maintain appearances. Nicholas flinched. Wait, Cassandra said slowly. Your car. That's Subaru. You said it was paid off. When did you buy it? 2019. You've had the same car for 6 years. While building a $43 million portfolio. Yes. That's. She paused. Actually, that's incredibly smart financial management. It's what works for me. Dad stood up abruptly, walking to the windows. When he turned back, his expression had shifted through several emotions: shock, embarrassment, and now something that looked like anger. You made us look like fools. No, Dad. You made assumptions. I just didn't correct them. That's the same thing. Is it? Was I supposed to force you to listen to information about my life that you clearly didn't want to hear? Yes. If you were building some kind of empire, you should have told us. I tried. At Thanksgiving 4 years ago, I mentioned I was looking at acquiring a hotel. You said, and I quote, "That's nice, dear, pass the potatoes." At Christmas 3 years ago, I said I'd closed on the Maritime Inn. Nicholas asked if that meant I was cleaning rooms now. Last Easter, I mentioned expanding to a second property. Mom suggested I focus on finding a husband instead. Silence fell over the suite again. We didn't realize, Mom said quietly. You didn't want to realize. My success didn't fit your narrative of who I was supposed to be, so you ignored it. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Everything okay up there? I replied, fine. Thank you for checking. Nicholas sat back down, his movements slow. What happens now? Now. You finish your dinner, enjoy the rest of your stay, and check out on Sunday as planned. My staff will continue to provide excellent service as they do for all our guests. And us? Mom asked. The family. That's up to all of you. What does that mean? It means I've spent 10 years being treated like the family failure. Like the disappointment who couldn't live up to her siblings' success. Tonight I learned that even now, even seeing proof of what I've built, your first instinct wasn't pride or curiosity. It was anger that I didn't tell you sooner. That's not fair, Cassandra protested. Isn't it? Dad just said I made you look like fools. Not that he was impressed by what I'd accomplished. Not that he was proud. His concern was how it reflected on him. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I'm going to leave now, I said, standing. You're welcome to finish dinner. It's excellent food. Chef Raymond is phenomenal. I hired him myself. Arya, wait, Mom stood too. Please. Let's talk about this. We just did. But we need to process this. To understand. Take all the time you need. I've had 10 years to process being dismissed by my own family. A few hours should be sufficient for you. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Nicholas? The champagne you're drinking? The $400 bottle? It's on the house. Consider it a welcome gift from the owner. I left before anyone could respond. David was waiting by the elevators. That looked intense. It was necessary. Will they check out early? No. They paid for 3 nights. They'll stay 3 nights. They're proud people, but they're not stupid with money. Unlike what they assumed about you. Unlike what they assumed about me, I agreed. Back in my office, I poured myself a glass of the same champagne Nicholas had been drinking. It was excellent. I'd personally selected every wine in the hotel's cellar. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Cassandra. Nicholas. That. I silenced it and turned to my computer. There were acquisition proposals to review. A hotel in Austin was struggling. The numbers were promising. An hour later, David knocked on my office door. Your family is leaving the suite. I thought you'd want to know. Leaving? They have 2 more nights. Apparently they're uncomfortable now. They're checking out. I felt something twist in my chest. Not regret exactly, but something. Process the early checkout, I said. Full refund for the unused nights. Are you sure? I'm sure. After David left, I sat alone in my office looking at the security camera feed that showed the lobby. I watched my family gather their bags, settle the bill, and walk out into the night. None of them looked up at the cameras. None of them asked to speak to me again. They just left. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Cassandra. I got your number from Mom. I just want to say, I'm impressed. What you've built is remarkable. I'm sorry we never saw it. I'm sorry I never looked. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, thank you. That means more than you know. She replied immediately, can we have coffee sometime? I'd like to hear about your work. Really hear about it. I'd like that, I wrote. Another message, this time from Nicholas. I was an asshole tonight. And for the past 10 years. You were right about everything. I'm sorry. I didn't respond to that one. Not yet. Instead, I finished my champagne and returned to the Austin hotel proposal. The property was undervalued. The location was perfect. The renovation costs were manageable. I drafted an offer. $6.8 million, all cash, close in 45 days. This was who I was. This was what I'd built. A $43 million portfolio that my family had never bothered to notice. Until tonight. Until the moment they'd stood in my hotel and told me I'd never own real estate. Their mistake. Not mine. Outside my office window, the city glowed with 1,000 lights. Somewhere in that city my family was processing what they'd learned. Processing who I really was. But in this office, in this hotel, in this empire I'd built so quietly that even my own family missed it, I was exactly who I'd always been. Just finally seen.